The Proud Faces Podcast.
So, Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, thank you for joining. And it was kind of, very interesting experience finding my first guest in the threads. I never done it before. So, first of all, what do you think about finding guests on threads? Has it happened to you before?
I haven't found any guests on threads. I found them through Instagram. So I like to sometimes, if something comes up or I stumble across an account, I like to get to know people. I am for talking to strangers, which is a great way to expand your reach and also put yourself in uncomfortable situations if you're an introvert. But at the same time, I found threads really good for looking for people to review my book and for sharing my book, because there's a lot of threads, or even because I'm on a platform called Podmatch, and they're like, hey, reach out to people on there and let them know about it if you feel it aligns. Like, don't be spammy or anything like that. So I'm on there a lot more, and I've actually found since I've interacted there more, my Instagram gets more attention because they're linked. So it's really interesting playing with the algorithms and that sort of thing. But yeah.
I like that you're exploring. So yeah, me too. I never try to use just one source for the guest, or the other podcasters use also the similar thing, which is a great thing. You never know, because I saw the post from someone from other podcasts that they are actually looking for guests, and I decided, why not? I should actually create a post, and I've got like 5 guests, and you're one of them. You're actually the first one from the threads. So it's amazing.
I'll be the guinea pig.
we'll do the introductions, since my post was about if someone wants to share the story. So, and I checked your profile. Looks like you have your own podcast. So, how does it feel to be a guest today rather than the host?
I love being on both sides. So I've done lots of different interviews, and I can talk to anybody about anything. So I truly don't mind being the host or being the guest. From being a host, I love learning from other people, but from being a guest, I like sharing everything that I've learned. So it's, I always just say knowledge stays knowledge unless you actually apply it and share it in the world, then it becomes wisdom. So, doesn't matter which way it's going. I actually like being a guest too.
Amazing. Good answer. So, and also I always ask the question, many guests, about since the podcast is called The Proud Faces. So what is the one thing that you're proud of most about in your life?
That's a good question.
Shouldn't be that difficult.
Well, there's a few things. I'm just trying to feel which one. You know what? Actually having the courage to quit my job when I didn't have a plan to get out of it.
That works.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So, and what are you grateful about the most right now in this moment?
So, it's just being able to wake up with my little one and cuddle him, and actually having the opportunity to be a mum when I put that aside to be the breadwinner for so many years.
Yeah. Sounds great. So, yes, we found each other pretty random, as all of my guests. It's amazing. I like the synchronicity. I think that's the world of the future, when we just synchronize and we don't really think about. And so I read your profile. So your work lies within the authority, coaching. So you're also a writer. So, and you want to share the story. I don't want to say less thing about you than it actually is. So I just give you the mic so you can introduce yourself and tell me more about authority coaching, because I met so many, mindset coaches, different types of coaching right now. But what is probably how you explain it? What do you do, like, exactly?
So as an authority guide or coach, I don't know, coach is this hijacked word at the moment. So I was like, let's use guide. But as an authority guide, it's just a fancy way of how to say it's time to listen to your intuition and your your guidance that comes from your soul. So when you truly strip away all those expectations, all the beliefs that you've been putting yourself in, the self-saboteur, the nice girl syndrome or nice guy syndrome, all those things, what does your soul truly want you to do? And I know you were mentioning that your soul's like needs to birth all this creativity. So many people suppress that and they'll think, oh, that's a childish whim, or that's something that only, I don't have time for that. And they put all these excuses in their life and then just become a a hollow version of themselves.
Right.
And then they find it really hard to actually start to listen to their intuition again. And we all have intuition. We all have spiritual gifts or psychic gifts. We all have all these different components that make our soul so unique. But it's just we've been so conditioned to think with our head instead of our heart that we forget that there's somebody else in there that came to Earth for a mission to share something amazing. And there's a reason why you're here.
Yeah. I totally agree that a lot of people are conditioning. So your work actually lies within the working with conditioning that like wrong beliefs, and you try to change that, put in like to default settings. Is that right?
Well, nothing's wrong. This is the tricky part, right? It's actually just changing your perspective on it because that's the whole thing. Like when something happens and you have witness accounts, there's always three sides to the story, not two, because there's what one person perceives, what the other person perceives, and then what actually is happening in the middle. There was this really cool meme that was popping up, well, not meme, a little video on Instagram where a man on one side of the room saw a white side of the ball and the man on the other side of the ball saw a black side of the ball, and they were both adamant they were right. But it just turns out the ball was black on one side and white on the other. So, that was the truth that came out from those perspectives. And often we let things that come through from beliefs of things that happen when we were children, things that happen to our parents, different values. Money is the biggest one that we have to unpack normally, because especially there's cultural beliefs around that. And I'm sure in Siberia, you have probably even all the other beliefs as well. But even, you might have to unpack. For me, it was you have to work hard for your money. And I was like,
Exactly.
but doing that's nearly killed me. Why am I going to work hard for my money? So, and in a literal sense, my health was deteriorating really quickly doing working into that belief. It's only when you step back and start to go, why do I have to do that? And why can't I choose a path that feels more aligned for me? And we're stepping out of this hustle culture where it's push, 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 push to actually needing to learn to be in flow, like astrologically, energetically, all these things are shifting us to, all right, if you need to rest, rest. If you're in creative flow, let it happen and let it keep going. And for me, I'm very similar to you. If I'm in like that creative pattern, I'll just stay awake. And then part of me goes, actually, body, you need to get sleep at least one day this week. That's for me anyway. And I need to reset and recover. But when I'm in flow, I have all this energy, but then sometimes that can be my downfall too, because when you get to know yourself so well, you realize that, I am in flow, but I'm really guilty of pushing myself to burnout. I need to monitor that. And these are all the lessons that I've learned in my life. And this is what I pass on to my clients too. And so many of them, when you ask, well, if you didn't have to do, and if you could choose anything in the world to do, what would you do? And a lot of them don't know. They're just truly scared and they don't know because they haven't dared to dream. They haven't allowed themselves to create a vision or step into themselves, but rather they've just been conditioned that, I have to work a 9 to 5 for the rest of my life. So actually, no, you don't have to. If it's not, don't get me wrong. If you love your 9 to 5, it's your passion. You love doing it. You get excited to go to work. By all means, you are in the right job. You are in the right position. If the idea of getting up for your 9 to 5 means that you hit snooze 100 times, you drag yourself out, you're constantly trying not to be late because you don't want to be there, you spend the day thinking about being everywhere else, that is not the place for you to be.
Right. I totally get it. But I will ask the question from my perspective. For example, since like 2011, 2012, I've been experimenting with foods, with lifestyles, and all different kinds of things. So right now, I realize I can actually help people with, coaching, like mindset coaching and diets, and just a really good lifestyle that will actually benefit you. So your body won't fail on you later. So that's from my experience, from my perspective, and from your perspective. Like you probably went through something that you suddenly realized, okay, so I've been living someone else's idea of me, and I'm gonna do this inner authority. So can you just go dive into the reason how you started and why you started?
Yep. It's a story.
That's the story.
So my background is a speech language pathologist, and
Okay.
I had the dream that I was going to own my own business. That's what I wanted to do. I was set out, that was good. And then 2 years of working, I actually got an opportunity to buy into a partnership. And I was like, wow. And the irony was that the day I was driving to a school to start my own contract with the school was the day I got the call for the partnership. But in my gut, I felt to, trust that intuition. And my gut said, do both. Don't discount starting your own thing. And later on, I was incredibly grateful for that moment, but
Right.
I got to step into a partnership. And the benefit of that was that I was working with somebody that had like many years of experience working in the industry. So she had a lot more clout, but I could see and intuitively the gaps in the market. And she was always comparing us to other practices. I'm like, stop doing that. That's a big thing. Don't compare yourself to other people or other workplaces. I always say, just focus on what you want, not what everyone else wants, right? So we built up the practice to a 7-figure business, and we had 8 full-time therapists. We had 2 admin staff, but in saying that, our relationship was falling apart, and I just felt I was constantly taking the blame for everything. So I was always the bad cop. Like, because I'd have to come in and, say, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can do that. No. And I never got the opportunity to say yes. And to me, that was just being really draining. And then we had this incident happen with a staff member, and it ended up being the beginning of the end. And because how I handled it was actually, no, she did something. She lied to us. She was didn't show up for work. She lied about where she was. And then when she tried to cover it up, she had, the excuse was worse than her just saying, oh yeah, I meant to say I wasn't coming in. And, there was just so many things. So I gave her a warning, because that's what you do when employees do that. And then she resigned, and I was actually incredibly happy because I was like, oh my goodness, this, because she'd been doing other things, but I couldn't prove those. This I had proof of. And that was the beginning of the end. And then I called that my messy divorce, because I went through a personal divorce, and it was really beautiful, and well, not beautiful, but it was a beautiful ending, and it was pretty smooth. And then I went through my business divorce, and it was crazy. But in the meantime, I'd started my own business. And so I built that up to a 6-figure business myself from scratch, like started from the ground up. But what I had done was I'd made that whole business revolve around me, which meant everything had to go through me. I say I was working 24/7 because I had massive insomnia. I was waking up in the middle of the night with 100 to-do lists. The best and worst thing I learned was delay send on emails. So I would get up in the middle of the night and respond to all the emails and just delay send to a more appropriate hour. And I forgot to, on one of my staff's emails, she's like, what are you doing sending an email at 3:33 a.m.? And I said, what are you doing reading the email at 3:33 a.m.? And because I was just deflecting the issue. But my body wasn't happy. I was seeing a naturopath nearly every week to give me like a box of supplements to keep my body from going into full-on adrenal fatigue, like adrenal failure, stress overload, and everything else. And my system wasn't happy. And worse than that was I never got to see my family. And even if I did, my brain was always still trying to figure out all the issues I had to deal with my business. So through that, I went through my spiritual awakening, or reawakening, I like to call it. And my dark night of the soul, so if anyone doesn't know what that is when part of your identity has to die spectacularly. And my dark night
Yes.
of the soul was my business had to fall apart. And there's never one, it doesn't happen over one night. It happens over many terms. So in the space of a week, I had 3 staff resign. And this is when I'd already decided I needed to pull back from the business. I wanted to step more into a managerial role. I didn't want to have to be working as much as I was. And I had a full breakdown because I knew my health wasn't okay. I wasn't seeing my family. You know, I didn't want to pick up more responsibility. And it's really hard to find great staff to fill those roles. And so I was in a ball on the floor, and I was not okay. I was just like, oh my goodness, you know, what the hell, you know? So I picked myself up eventually. My son and my husband were like, come on, mom. Like my son's like, it's okay. And I'm like, it's not okay. You know, because in the moment it does feel like your world's falling apart. And then a month later, another 3 staff resigned in a week, and I still hadn't replaced the original 3. And by this point, I was angry. I was so angry. I remember going out to this space in the bush near and on the land of where I live, and I just yelled. I was so angry. And I accidentally took that anger out on one of my staff that was leaving. And it was a good lesson for me of actually owning your stuff, because I went into her and apologized. And I said, you were just in my line of fire, and I apologize for that. And she actually said to me, I actually respect you more for doing that.
Right.
This is about being accountable for your actions, right? And
Of
then
course.
a month later, another 3 resigned in the week. So, but by this point, I went, you know what? I don't want this business anymore. I don't want to deal with this anymore. My lease is coming up in May next year. If I haven't sold the business, I'm just shutting the doors, because I was that done. And fortunately, the universe sent me a beautiful person to buy my business. But then that started my journey into my money story, because when I sold the business, I got $250,000, which is pretty amazing. But in my subconscious, I didn't work hard for that money. It just came to me. Although you could argue I was working my butt off for however many years to build this business up. But at the same time, my subconscious didn't believe that. And we used a chunk of the money to pay off a lot of debt. Like we paid off our car, we paid off taxes, we paid off all these kind of debts. And we invested it into some things for our house. And then the rest just disappeared. To this day, my husband and I still aren't sure how we push that money away. And this is the thing. If you don't feel you are able to hold that money and not feel guilty about it, it will find a way to just float out of your life. You'll have bills unexpectedly come in. You know, you'll have things go wrong that require money, whatever it might be. And this is where when you sit down and start to unpack that, then all of a sudden we were living week to week. I was like, what is going on here? And at the same time, the person that bought my business, and I was working on commission, the business started to fall apart because it was already precarious as it was.
Yeah.
And then as it started to fall apart, and I didn't lie to him when he bought it, I said, here are the issues. You know, you need to address these straight away. And he goes, no, when I buy a business, I like to wait a year before I intervene. I'm like, okay. But the business did. It started to decline. I wasn't earning as much money. And, you know, we're just sitting there. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, how are we living week to week? I thought we'd have a breathing room and savings and all these other things. And it actually took me a lot of courage to go to my boss and say, hey, I can't keep working at this rate. Like, it's not supporting my family. I'm going to start doing my own thing outside, still staying in that speech realm, which isn't what I wanted to do anyway. And he just said, oh, what if I pay you this much a week? And I said, and he goes, it's fine. I like having you here. You're the reason why I wanted this business. And it was such a beautiful lesson for me of actually someone seeing my worth. And not
Yeah.
having but to have the courage. I could have asked him months before, but I kept putting excuses in my way. And this is,
Yeah.
when it comes down to pulling apart all those things that you use to self-sabotage yourself, where do you find yourself in the middle? Where are
Right.
you when you meet that self-saboteur? And you say, for me, when you say to her, why didn't we do this sooner? Like, well,
Of course.
but there's a whole heap of other reasons. So that, yeah. And then in the midst of that, I learned the value of investing in myself. And then it got to a point, I don't even know how long, it must have been last year, where we decided, my husband and I sat down and went, what lifestyle do we want? And we went, actually, we don't want this huge mortgage burden. We don't want to live where we're living. Where we live is beautiful, but we all have a craving, my son, my husband and I, to be near the water, like to be at the beach. We're like, why are we living here? It's 90 minutes to the nearest beach. It's just all these things. So we put our house for sale. And I'm like, I feel it's going to happen really quickly. Like, I'm really excited. And then
Right.
I went to resign, and instead of putting the date that I intuitively felt to put on the resignation, I conditioned it. And I put, when the house sells, I'll resign. Now, if anyone's done this before, the universe will not respond to conditions. So the house didn't sell, and we were still here. And I was still going to work, even though I love working with children, but I didn't love what I was doing. I had a handful of clients who knew I could do other energetic work. So I work a lot in the quantum realm with energetic healing, shifting patterns. I've seen miracles happen with some of my clients in terms of pain and that sort of thing, if it's aligned, So I've
Right.
seen all these shifts, and a couple of my clients' parents knew that. So they were my favorite clients because I got to do all these spiritual things with them, right?
Yeah.
And all this energetic work. And then the rest of the time, I was just another version of me that didn't feel aligned. And going to work was really getting more and more difficult, to the point where I started to go numb. So I started to lose feeling in my left pinky. It went up through my arm. It went up through to the point I couldn't feel half my face. And I went to my beautiful team of, I'm one that practice what I preach. I have a beautiful team of people, alternative practitioners that I go to. I went to chiro, I went to biotuning, I went to massage, I went to acupuncture, I went to my homeopath. Everyone would give me a different opinion, and the thing was always the same. It would disappear for a few days and then it would come back.
Right.
And it was only till I had these guests, this beautiful couple that I met on my podcast, and I heard, you need to book in with them. And they said, Catherine, you know this, until you find the underlying cause for the numbness, it's never going to go away. And then I went, oh my goodness, I'm numbing myself to go to work. And that's what it came down to, because we needed the income. So circling back to when I said my proudest moment, I actually quit my job. I actually gave my boss a month's notice, and I need to quit. I said, I can't keep working here. And he thought it was, God bless him, he thought it was because of him.
Yeah.
And he's like, so he's there having these worthiness issues, and he comes in and he's like, is it because of me? I said, no, you're the easiest boss to work for. I said, I love working for you. I just don't love what I'm doing for you. And he was so relieved for that. And then he went, you know what? I fully understand. I wouldn't want to work in your job either. I was like, okay, radio.
Yeah.
But it caused a lot of tension because we had no plan. There was no backup. My husband ended up going back to work. He'd been the stay-at-home dad for 8 years, and it was a massive shock to his system to need to go back to the workforce. And at the same time, my system needed that. But then, we were it's funny how long we've made the money stretch for, even though he was earning a fraction of what I could earn previously. But this is the law of there's always enough, right? That law of, I can't think of the fancy name for it. But there's always enough. So this is where I went, I said, do you see the contrast here that we've managed to still keep going, and our house still hasn't sold yet, but there's a reason that's come very clear. There's always a bigger reason, right? But it's really interesting how it just keeps playing out. And when you learn to trust yourself, and my biggest soul lesson is trust. It's a big one.
Yeah.
And
It's a
trusting
superpower.
myself. Yeah. And trusting my intuition when everyone else is around me is telling me the opposite. So that's been my journey. And this is where I'm like, this is really powerful. So many people don't listen to their intuition. It's like, and more people, especially with the shift in technology, are becoming to rely on AI to make all their decisions for them, or the phone to make the decisions for them. The best example I heard, it's not my example, but I love it, was you go outside and part of you's like, I need to grab that umbrella. It's going to rain today. But then you look at your app and it says, oh no, it's sunny all day. Don't worry about it, kind of thing. So you ignore that intuitive hit and you go, and then sure enough, there's a storm later and you needed your umbrella. And instead of going, oh my goodness, I should have listened to myself. Oh, the weather was wrong. So this is where, these little intuitive hits are what keeps us in alignment, but also keeps us coming back to our purpose and our soul mission. Because if you have a yearning that is craving for something bigger, like I'm not meant to be doing this doesn't feel what I'm meant to be doing, then you're constantly going to be searching for something more and feeding a hungry ghost. Because when you don't have your own dream or your own vision that feels in alignment, you end up living somebody else's.
Yeah, exactly right. I like how beautifully you did the retrospective view on the proud moment of your life, because a lot of people actually quitting the jobs these days, but your story is very unique. Do you agree that in your line of work, like since you went through this experience and then you can help with your perspective, with your spiritual gifts, to navigate the life of other person and help them to see the right perspective? Do you think there is a way to skip any of that, what you went through for the other person, or there is no way? It's just the harsh school that everyone has to go through.
The universe is, I find for me, my life has always been in threes, and I used to always say, oh, where's the third bad thing? Like if bad things were happening in my life, but that was actually creating that scenario to have another bad thing, right? But often things do happen in threes. And if there's something happening in threes around me, three's a master number. So if there's a three happening, I pay attention. But the universe has this way of, and that's why my Dark Night of the Soul ended up three repetitions.
Right.
It depends how long it takes you to learn the lesson in all of it. So,
It will repeat. Yes.
exactly. So if you were in a relationship that didn't benefit you, then you go date the next person. 90% of the time it'll be exactly the same as your last relationship. Just it'll take a while before you actually see the same pattern. And then you leave that relationship because you're still not happy. And then you go to the next relationship, but you forget to ask, what is this teaching me? Why is this for me? And it's when you can see the pattern that keeps repeating that you can step out of it. I had a client / friend, and he kept ending up in relationships where he knew they had to end, but he felt guilty and would hurt the other person's feelings if he broke up the relationship. And I said, but that's your thing. And then when we started pulling it apart, it was his lineage as well. His mum did the same thing. His brother did the same thing. Like everyone in that family, I said, you need to be the one to end the relationship. I said, that is the cycle breaker. When you choose to be the one to step out, not this mutual thing, not wait for them to do it. You actually have to take your power back and be the one to do it. Otherwise, you're just going to keep ending up in the same cycle. So this is where the universe, when they want us to shift something, it'll just keep giving you the same lesson. And if you think you're done and it's not fully done, it'll come back in a different kind of form. And sometimes it is an invitation for you to actually say, no, I'm done with this. So I had another client, and she was saying she went to this like kind of show, like a showground kind of fair here.
Right.
And all these people kept coming up to her that she hadn't seen for years, like years. And all of them had bad memories. And she just went, nope, done with this timeline, done with this, done with these people. I am done. I am not allowing this to come back. And sometimes the universe does that too, to see, are you sure you know what you want? So
Right.
there was this beautiful video on it's just the things that pop up on Instagram sometimes are truly in alignment. I'm not on there a lot. It's just when I am on there, the right thing pops up, right? So like I'll go on there to post. I'm like, oh, that's a really good thing. And so what it was this person was being served at a restaurant, and she's looking at the menu, and the menu was just fries. And she's like, oh, I'm really hungry.
Oh, yes. I've seen it. It's
seen this
amazing.
one? Yeah. I'll explain it to people who haven't
Of course,
seen it.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the waiter's like, what do you want? She's like, well, I'm really hungry. There's only fries to order. I'm going to get fries. And then the person next to her's eating pasta. She's like, how did you get pasta? She goes, you can just ask for what you want. You can ask the universe for what you want. Just ask what you want. And she's like, oh, but I've already ordered the fries, they're like, but she's like, but do you want the fries? She goes, no, I want pasta. She goes, well, order the pasta. And so then she calls the waitress over and she goes, actually, can I cancel my order of fries and ask for pasta instead? She goes, okay, no problem. And then she still brings out the fries. And she's like, oh, I'm so hungry. I'm just going to eat it anyway. And the other person's like, no, you wanted pasta. Remind them that you want pasta. So then she calls over the waitress and she's like, oh, I want pasta. She's like, are you sure? She's like, yeah, I'm sure. And so anyway, so she had to wait for a bit, and then finally the pasta came. And the point is that sometimes when we ask for what you want, the universe will test you. And it's not as a harsh kind of tough love. It's, are you sure you want this? Are you sure this is where you want to go with your life? And you sure this is what you want to happen? So for us and our house not selling, has caused financial stress. Don't get me wrong. At the same time, most of the time, I'm pretty chill about it. Whereas the old me would have been like, where's the money?
Yeah.
And, looking at all the scarcity rather than seeing all the abundance in my life instead. But what has played out is that there's things happening with the land we own next to our house, which will mean that we will actually be significantly more financially abundant than what we would be if we sold our house a year ago. So it's interesting because then we found this house and it ticked nearly all of our boxes. There was one thing and we could easily add it. There was a double rainbow when we left. The owners were like sound healers, so good energy. There was money in my pocket. It fell at their feet. So there was all these signs that this house was in alignment with us. And then it sold to somebody else. And we were very confused by that. And my heart went, there must be something better. And then I actually said to my husband, I don't want that much land to maintain. I want to travel. I don't mind having acreage, but I don't want land full of horses or cows that are being adjusted, because how do we leave them? So to me, that was a reflection there. But then my husband brought it up the other day and goes, oh, I wish we just found a way to buy that property. I said, I don't, I've moved on. There's something better. There's something better. And I said, and, just trust that. I said, stop living in the past. You got to move to the future.
Yeah, regarding the pasta order in the restaurant, it's such a good example. I wish I could have Jamie like Joe Rogan does, so we could actually pull it up and watch the video. But I actually will put it under the podcast so people will understand, because you need to actually watch it to understand it. I also really, really admire people who go through these spiritual lessons, shadow work and everything, and they still come out smiling and actually kind to other people, because spiritually aligned and spiritually grown doesn't mean actually nice person. Some people are not nice, and they actually can be really strong spiritually rich. So looking at your experience and looking at you right now, I really admire that you can able to smile wide and actually look at this. But to me, in my experience, I also I've got story. Everybody has a story. I don't think I'm on that level where actually I'm a super nice person. Some people don't like me, and I can live with that, because if you like by many, you're actually doing something wrong.
Yeah, and this is that whole nice girl or nice boy syndrome and everything, right? So I have clients, and she was still, and I've so many people I've met, and they're being really nice still to people who are just absolute assholes, for lack of a better word. Sorry if you can't say that on here. Idiots, I don't know. And it's not even from a judgment point of view. They're just truly not nice people, and they're still being nice to them and placating them. And I just say, why? And they're like, oh, there's some good in there. And I'm like, but they're not being good to you. So why are you allowing that into your life? You're basically saying that's what I deserve. That's the level of respect I deserve. And my old coach, he actually said, be quick to trust, but even quicker to take it away. So, I have had to put my foot down with people because they'll break a relationship or they'll break down an expectation or, I had to call my family on a lot of things because it was just this continual cycle of avoiding and secrets. And I'm like, why are we like this with each other? And even when I step more into my spiritual work, and doing more psychic things, my dad's to the point where if I call him and I'm like, are you okay? Or is somebody okay? He's like, what did you dream about or what happened? And I was like, oh, okay, let me pan it out. Whereas my mom has taken a little bit longer to accept it, even though she's incredibly intuitive. And she was the one that which family secrets, right? She said, oh, it's no wonder that you can do all this spiritual work because there's a line of white witches in our family. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, oh yeah, your great grandmother was a white witch. And I was like, what? And she goes, that's why we're all so intuitive. And so I'm just sitting there for years, like not knowing any of this, knowing that weird things kept happening. I could predict things that didn't make sense, or I just know things that didn't make sense, that how I knew them, which is one of my gifts because I have claircognizance. So I'll just know things, which is pretty cool. But it was so beautiful to have that information from my mum because then my cousin rang up and she goes, oh, I don't know why, but my sister said to call you because I'm going through all these weird experiences and I don't know what to make of them. And I said, oh, let me tell you about our family line. And she's like, what? So it's interesting how it plays out and it's interesting how it comes through. But like you said, the most beautiful people are the people that aren't hardened by those experiences, but also who have choose to not stay the victim in their story and choose to step out of it and create a new life rather than letting the events that happen to them define who they are now.
Right. I totally agree that like I said, I admire those people that are not hardened and there's so much work to be done for those who are already on the way because like you said, in your case, it was 3 times repeated. For me, God knows, I lost the count. So, and you never say it's done. It's like the point when you're actually ready, when you're actually out of the trenches, you're not gonna actually feel the relief. You're just gonna be so strong, so armored that you're ready for anything. That's probably the answer. And I wanted to ask you about your spiritual work because we can actually also talk about your book. We'll take that as a second part. But before that, if you could distill your spiritual work into the essence, into not to diminish in any way, but for the clients, what kind of energy for you, if you could say it in one word? For example, it's like inspiration, hope, or love. Many beautiful things.
I think it's possibility. That, that they suddenly feel everything's possible. It's whereas, and I guess it is a little bit of hope, but at the same time, it's more anchored than that because hope can be fleeting. Hope can be in the moment. Whereas, that is a possibility. I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And when you realize that you're an infinite being and that you can choose to do whatever possibility aligns with your soul, that is when you start to get big growth and change. And you'll go through dark night of the soul round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. But at the same time, because there's a possibility of something amazing, you'll keep working towards that.
So when people start this inner authority work, what's the biggest misconception they walk in with?
That I'll fix all their problems.
You pay the bills and everything.
And that's the thing I say to them. I don't know what's going to come through, because everything that comes through is I always set the intention for the highest and greatest good. And I know that's a term that's used a lot, but it has so much power. And the reason we use it so much in the spiritual world is it protects us as the practitioner, and it protects them as the soul that is vulnerable and coming to you for that support. And the amount of things that come through, sometimes it'll be, even I'll have someone come in for just a 30-minute, free call just to get to know if we can work together. And I'm like, no, they're telling us whilst you're here, we have to do this. Like we're doing an inner child clearing right now. They're like, what? I was like, no, these are the instructions we're getting. There's no timeline for this. I'm not telling you to book back in. We need to do it right now. And they're like, this is unexpected.
Right.
I said, yeah, that's my life. You don't expect anything. It's just unexpected. But it's a lot of what I do is I teach people how to do it on themselves, because I don't want people to see me as a savior or a hero, because then that keeps them as a victim. I want them to see me as someone that supports them or challenges them and allows them to step outside their little comfort zone, because the comfort zone doesn't allow you to expand and grow. And, how to teach, courage is something that we learn. So it's like, how can I be courageous in this moment to allow myself to expand, rather than my life has all these problems. Can you fix them? No, you have to change the perspective on what's happening within you. Because when you start to change what's happening within you, that is when your external starts to change as well. They haven't done anything to people in your life. It's just you've changed your perspective of what's happening.
Right. And about the misconception, I always, with my clients, I use the question right from the start, right from the get-go. So what kind of expectations you have from today's session? So right now we just clear all this nonsense that you some sort of guru that you're going to help with everything. No, my job is to activate whatever you have in you, because we are not different. You're just not there yet. And it's not even at levels, not to diminish in any way. It's just some people get there faster, some not. But we are here to work. You will get activated. And at some point, you're going to be coaching me with whatever you do. So it's something like that.
Yeah, but beautifully summarized, Rick. 100%. Yeah.
So you probably have a lot of questions, and since we live in a very technological world right now, so what's your stance on AI and intelligence?
So I've written a
I
novel.
have to ask this question.
This is a funny segue, because the novel I've just released, so it's a romantic thriller, is about the overreach of technology in our lives and how a tech-savvy stalker can flip your life upside down. But I've always been really protective of my stance online. And for years I was hiding. I'm not going to lie. I was hiding from the world, especially during COVID. I said things and I had fingers pointed at me just for speaking truths and these sorts of things. And so I hid. I got off all social media because I didn't want to absorb all that. And I slowly started to step back in. So I went back on Instagram. I couldn't get back on Facebook. They banned me. That's a whole other story. I went on Threads. And then I started doing interviews, and then I'm on everything anyway. So I'm like, why am I hiding? Like my face is out there now. My voice is out there. That's why I started my podcast, etc. But then this push with AI, I was so resistant to it. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, no, I don't want AI. And then I started learning about how much time it could save me. And, it's still, you have to use your discernment. So if you're someone that will default to go into AI to solve all your problems, answer all your questions, you are using AI as your intuition. You are replacing yourself with that. That is where you're not using your discernment. You're just taking it at face value. I am the one that will argue and yell at ChatGPT. I will yell at him. I think it's like a male energy. I will yell at him. That is not what I want. That is not what I asked for. Like, you were completely off things, and it will have dumb days. I'm not going to lie. There are days. So just the other day, I was creating this worksheet and I was like, you know what? I don't want to sit there and play with graphics and everything. I'll just get it to create an image. I'll tell it what I want in the image. So I said, this is what I want the worksheet to be structured as. It showed me, I'm like, great, turn it into an image. And what it did was it just made the lines a little bit too short, because I'm doing this workshop with kids. I'm like, no, they need more room to write. Kids write big, right? I'm like, no, they need more room. And then instead of just adding length to the lines, it turned it into a dinosaur activity worksheet. And I was like, it said my dinosaur story. And it was a very cute worksheet, but it had nothing to do with what I asked. And I was like, what is this? And then there's been other times like I've been using it and I'm like, no, that's wrong. You told me this last time. And when I researched that, that was correct. You were giving me the wrong information. And this is where, as a society, we can become dependent on it and lose our sovereignty. Or we can use it as a tool to save us time, but still use our own discernment and still have our own voice within that. So it's like, how are you going to use it to capitalize and embrace in your life? And so I use it to write my SEOs for my podcast episodes and my ASEOs, which are answer SEO things. And then I use it to help me create marketing strategies. It'll help me create little slide carousels. It will help me create my graphics for my podcast. Like all these things that would take me hours upon hours to do. It does in a minute or 2 minutes, depending how long the image takes to generate. And I just look at that and go, what an amazing time saver where I can put my energy into something else that doesn't frustrate me, because those things I don't like doing. And I was having a reading from somebody and they actually said to me, write down a list of your strengths and write down a list of your weaknesses. And as I was writing my list of weaknesses, which was marketing, SEO, social media, I heard just use ChatGPT. I was like, oh, okay. Thank you. I will do that. And so that's when I started going, oh my goodness, and when I started doing that, I got the feedback straight away. More people were finding my videos, more people were finding my Substacks because I was changing the SEOs, all these things. So it was immediate feedback. Even I had a carousel for a free masterclass I was doing. People booked off that carousel. I'd never had that happen before. And so I was like, thank you for the feedback, universe. Thank you for the feedback. So there is this tendency that we would let AI make all our decisions for us. And that's the danger. When you start letting AI override what you feel is right, it's even, they might write a little post for you for social media and you're like, that doesn't feel like me, but I couldn't be bothered. I'm going to post it anyway. That is when you get into actually, no, you're letting AI replace your voice. You're letting AI overcome you, and even I had a friend and she was using AI to do some astrology, like astral cartography things. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's your astrology can help determine where the best place is for you to live in the world, right? That where you will thrive, or it might even be where you live, what's the pitfalls being there. So you're aware of it and you can try and balance that energy out. So when she did it the first time, it came back on these things. She's like, really? Where I live now? Like, this is so weird. Like, I don't feel like I should be here. And then when she researched it more and actually understood what the different lines meant, she's like, actually, we're not meant to be here. Like, it actually got it wrong. And so she yelled it and said, you got it wrong. Oh, yes. And then it apologizes because it pretends to be, adopt that kind of human emotion kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like, well, no, you were just wrong. So this is where you have to use your discernment constantly and trust your intuition there. If it's like, well, no, that doesn't feel right, go deeper, go do your own research. You can even use a different AI, for goodness sake, and just compare them all. There's so many different ways you can do that. So there's also the talk about AI replacing people, right? Like jobs and don't get me wrong, like I think marketers probably should be a bit concerned, because I have had more efficient marketing campaigns come from ChatGPT than I have from marketers, to the point when I'm talking to the marketers who come and seek me out, who I say, what are you doing about this? And what are you doing about this? And they just look at me, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I was like, well, that's concerning that I know more about that than you, and you're meant to be the professional with more knowledge in this situation. So, I feel people will still want people. I will go to the shop sometimes and I don't want to deal with the finicky self-serve checkouts. Sometimes I just want to go to the cash register and let them pack my bags for me and do it, because I have a conversation with them. this is where, and I still laugh at the irony that, there's meant to be these self-serve checkouts that take people, meant to take people away, but yet then they have to hire all the people to make sure that they're being used properly, to then counteract all the glitches that happen, and then also to check the bags on the way out. So, there's still this part where you still need humans, and the less, and there's also, you can say no. A lot of people don't realize that if you, are on the phone and they're constantly trying to put you through to a chatbot or something like that, you can say, no, I want to talk to a human. When you're, there's always this ability that you can say no and choose a different way to do it too.
Yeah. Also, the thing about AI replacing people, I think, at some point on some level is actually giving doing the favor. Because, for example, you had your experience with your job right now. So like before, so imagine if AI happened earlier, it would just be replaced, or like in the moment you would say that's not fair, but in the future it's actually was a great thing to happen to me, because these people who actually backing the, groceries at the store, they're not getting paid a lot to smile, right? They're just doing because they're good people. If they had like a specific line in their pay stub for smiling, it would actually cost a lot for any place to work in.
Well, and it is too. It's like, some of those people are there just because they want some extra cash, and some of them are there because they feel they have to be. And you can feel the energy difference, right? And I interviewed this guest on my podcast, and she said, look, if you're working a 9 to 5, show up and give 100% at that 9 to 5, because the universe will balance that energy back out, and if you show up and you're not grateful for the opportunity to have some income coming in, or whatever reason you're in that position, then it's going to you're going to stay in that scarcity. You're not going to get opportunities. You're not going to attract people because you're not rising above the situation that you're in. And this is where it comes back to, okay, I'm getting replaced by a computer, but are you being replaced by a computer, or is the computer just taking away the elements of your job that were trivial in the first place? I know a lot of people were saying, well, I had to write this letter for a client recently, and I hadn't done a letter like this for years. And I said, okay, I went into chat and I said, hey, can you write this letter? I kept all the confidential information out, but I was like, can you write this letter based on these standards so we can get some help for this client? The letter it wrote, Vic, was like beyond anything I could write. And it factored in so many things that I didn't even know were aware, because it read all the guidelines and it went through it all. And I still had to put in details and I still had to add little elements to it. But apart from that, I was like, this is the best letter I've seen. I couldn't have done that. So I was like, how much time did that save me? How much research did that save me? And, then I went and double checked because I was really conscious. And it's like, oh no, these are all the parameters. It got it right. So, and I know a lot of lawyers now are starting to use it to look up the laws really quickly. Like, hey, what's the law that was attached to this provision or whatever like that? So again, how do you use it to make your life easier rather than replace yourself?
I would totally agree, because if you compare it to a personal assistant, there's just some things you allow your assistant to do, some things you would still want to keep it to yourself. And for example, I'm into art. I write music sometimes, and sometimes if I want to use, and a lot of musicians actually do use successfully, AI music writing applications, it looks like from the first glance that it does, the juice worth the squeeze, right? But at the end, you still won't have this crafty process of doing things, and it applies to business, to art, to everything. So I think you said it beautifully that it depends. Like if you keep it as an assistant, it will actually save a lot of time. If you want to keep it like authentic, you still add yourself. You just make sure you look at it before you send it anywhere. So let's move on to the second part. We will talk about your book. It's called My Virtual Obsession. Is that correct?
Yes,
I think I remember
correct.
correctly.
Correct.
So it's a psychological romantic thriller. Oh, beautiful, beautiful cover. I would definitely pick at it. I haven't had chance to read it, but it's something would actually catch my eye because, I like the dark covers because people looking for fancy ones, always for flashy ones. To me, this one is, this is me for sure.
I have to get more copies because this one's like an author copy because I had to proof it before it came out. But my husband designed the cover, which is really cool. And
I see the man's touch for sure.
yeah. Well, the book itself was such a beautiful practice of honoring myself because I remember years ago, my good friend, who's also my naturopath, who was the one keeping me alive, when I was like going to him for every week. But he said to me, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? And my automatic response was, I want to write. I want to write. So I'm like, how am I going to find this space to write? So I just started writing 15 minutes a day. And
Beautiful.
And I call it a self-commitment practice, right? Because there's all this self-love and self-care. It's like, no, it's actually committing to yourself. And I got to a point that I made it into such a habit that if I went to bed and had forgotten to do my 15 minutes, I actually woke up and had to go write. And I did it on so many things. I did it on my phone. I did it on my computer. Like if I didn't want to look at my computer, I did notes on my phone and I'd email it to myself. And eventually I wrote 90,000 words, like over 90,000 words. And people were like, what? I said, because if you're in flow, you end up doing more than 15 minutes. But even if you don't feel like writing that day because you might not be feeling as creative, you go over the work you've already done and you just make sure it all syncs together. And that was the only thing I found is because I was doing 15 minutes a day, some of the bits were a little bit jarred. So I had to put the flow in. And then I was like, oh, I really need an editor. And so how long did it take me to write my book? I think I started in August and I finished in January. This is last year. And then I just sent it to a publisher and I thought, let's just see what happens. Yeah. And I didn't hear anything back. And so I just kind of put it to the side because another book had to be birthed first. So I learned. So I got channeled through a book on spiritual ethics called Pillars for Life. And so that book had precedence and my husband's like, no, you should write your other book. Like, that's so important. I said, no, this needs to come out. And I didn't expect it to be like a bestseller or anything. It was just, it had to be put out in the world. So I released that book last year and then I circled back to this novel. And so it's been a little bit of a love process. And then I needed an editor and then Peter suggested my friend because she's got this incredible attention to detail and she was one of the best things that I did. So she said, these characters, this is what I question about these characters. These need more development. I said, oh my goodness, you could actually be an editor, a developmental editor, 100%. And then I was like, it's too waffly. So then I used AI to help me edit it down. And so first I uploaded the manuscript. I said, check these arcs, the story arcs, make sure they flow through because of how the book is written. And let's go through chapter by chapter. And Vic, it was painstaking. So some days it would be amazing. It'd be right on par. We'd get it to the point. And then some days it would start beautifully. And then I would just do one word for each paragraph. I'm like, oh my goodness, like what happened there? And so I really had to use my discernment and play with it. And then eventually we ended up cutting out 30,000 words, which didn't actually need to be in there. It was just, sometimes when you try to explain a point, you go into fluff, and it made it really, it put another level of tone to it. Like it just added to that suspense and that thriller. And it ended up being this beautiful, beautiful work that to my husband's testament, he's like, I read the whole thing and I don't do that with books. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's amazing. That's the best review I can have, so it was such a labor of love. And then I had this idea which someone suggested to me years ago, you put it in your head to release it chapter by chapter. And so I started a Substack called My Book Obsession. You can still jump over there now. So mybookobsession.substack.com. And I released some of the chapters through there. I released actually nearly half the book on there. But you get the first chapter for free. And then you get reflection questions on each of the chapters. And then you have to pay to become a subscriber, but there's some chapters you can get for free. There's also bonus chapters on there. There's one bonus chapter. There's more coming because of when I'm in the zone, then it comes out. But what it does is it's actually an invitation to go deep into a book, because so often we read a book and we discard it and then we don't do anything with it. Whereas this book actually explores how loneliness can make you do things that you never thought you'd go to, the extremes you never thought you'd imagine. You know, for Clive, who's the main character, so he's a billionaire, but he's a kind of a conscious billionaire, if you will, accidental billionaire. He was so lonely, he logged into a VR dating system and never expected A, for it to be real, or B, for it to infiltrate every single area of his life. You know, and then because he actually met the person that he wanted to be with in real life, and not realizing, it takes him a while to realize, and he questioned, is this AI? Is this an avatar? Is this, you know, a person? And there was lots of things that happen in the book, to the point that you just see how loneliness can drive people to do these things, but also how, if you're not aware, tech can actually infiltrate every area of your life. And even from me, from a sovereign point of view, I always teach my clients and people around me, don't put all your money in the one bank. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what happens if that bank goes down? What do you do? I'm like, and is all your money in the same, like, can it be accessed by a key card or a card? Oh yeah. Well, like, good luck if you get hacked, all your money will go. You know, so even in this book, it hints on those kinds of things to do, to be, you know, more savvy and more aware of your presence when it comes to technology. So I wove that in there as well, just to have these deeper levels of conversation, these deeper levels of understanding. And by the end, you're just so immersed in this story and cannot believe the extremes that this stalker goes to that, but you also understand how it got to that point as well.
Yeah, you've mentioned about the how you actually wrote the book, because you did your consistent work. And my very first guest was actually also a writer. He already released 3 books, and he also mentioned the tenacity, actually writing for 15-20 minutes. I guess you guys have something in common, because to me, it's also one of the goals I want to hit, to write something. I'm working on that, but with my other projects, I see it's actually not the, really creative work just of one night or 2 nights for me, which I normally do. If I write a song, I will do it in one night and I'll just release it, because I'm not going to get it better. But with the book, I think it requires tenacity. You have to reconnect with the same thoughts that you had before, which is probably not easy thing to do. And you also mentioned about the channeling. So if you are familiar with authors like Lee Carroll and Dan Walsh, is there any connection how they channel and how you channel?
Yeah, so my books appear, so I actually have all these stories that are ready to be written on my phone. So what happens is I'll get a dream, and this dream is so vivid, it plays the whole book out like a movie in my head, like really quickly. And then I have to birth it, and then I have to write it. So when I started writing, when I was actually writing, I didn't know what I was writing. It just came through. And I said it was my spirit writer, but now I realize it was actually just my higher self coming through. So anyone not knowing what your higher self is the highest version of your soul. It's your soul without all the crap that we wrap around ourselves, right? So as I was writing the book, I was like, she did what? Like, what's happening? I was actually as stunned as what was coming out and it was a really fun way to write the book, because I was detached from the story. It was just coming through me. It wasn't me beating up myself about, oh, this character should do this, or character development. And I'm not putting that to a side if that's your process. But for me, that's not my process. My process is, okay, here's the story. I've seen the movie. Now, how do I transcribe that into words? And I still see it as a movie. And even the book I'm writing now, I've kind of paused on it because I had to focus my attention on this, and I had a few other things happening in my life. But I've actually no, I need to go back and weave it together more and have more of this now that I've kind of not scripted, but refined my writing voice. Okay, I need to go back and start to do that and weave that same thing. So if people pick it up, they know it's still me writing it. It's just a different story that's being told, but the same elements will be there. It'll be the same romantic kind of thriller suspense. And the next one, it's set in a cult. I can say that. So it's set in a cult.
Right.
And I'm like, why am I writing about a cult? I know nothing about cults. And I started writing it. And then weirdly, I met somebody that was in a cult and got out. And everything she described was what was being described through my writing. So it was a really beautiful reinforcing trust. And that information is there and coming through. And probably maybe in a parallel life, I was in a cult. Who knows? So it's just, and it's such a nice way to write because it's just allowing that creativity to come through. A bit like when you write a song, right? You don't sit there and judge everything that comes out. It's like, this is just what needs to come out of me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way. I guess every channel, is different. Like the way you do it. Like Dan Walsh, he was actually found himself, journaling every day, and he realized he's journaling. The God, the highest self, is actually journaling through him. So it's not like us doing regular journaling. We're actually thinking and letting out all the thoughts we have. He actually can able to speak, and the book is called Conversation with God. So you have a cooler way too. Like it's like you can actually see the movie, but I guess if you don't put it into words or into some sort of art, it's gonna actually, trying to find a better word. It's not gonna be really good for you because you need to let it out as well because it's actually there. It's channel.
Yeah, it's almost like you let a dream die. Really.
Right.
And you actually will
doesn't feel good.
No. And it's interesting because I've had so many dreams change or things shift because as you evolve, so do your dreams and so do your visions of what you want. And, as this continues to shift, we actually need to let space to mourn the dreams that didn't happen as well. So even if you have a relationship that ends, you need to mourn that relationship, even though you're better out of it. You still, if you marry someone, for example, because I've been divorced before, and you have to still mourn the image because when you marry that person on that day, you have this vision for your future. We're going to grow old together. We're going to have kids. You don't sit there when your marriage day and go, oh, we're going to end up in divorce in however many years. So you still have to allow that to mourn that. So even for me, I never imagined to birth this book, the way that it came out. But if I hadn't, like you said, honored that, it would keep pulling at me and it would allow part of me to die. And then I'm not honoring myself and committing to myself in that aspect either. And you don't have to write for anybody else. You just write for you, or you just create your music for you. It doesn't have to land on anybody else. You aim to create it for you. And then whoever else finds it and resonates with it, you just get excited about that and go, great, it resonates with somebody else. Thank you.
I totally agree. Just God knows how many times I actually shared my demos, my music with my friends previously, who told me like, oh, you shouldn't release it. It's not good. It's just mediocre. And some people saying it's just amazing. So it's just always, if you do it for you, you just don't ask for permission. You just release it. And, I don't know if it applies to publishers because they're still not your friends. They have different kind of you. But right now there are so many online services. Yeah, you just self-publish it and you find your writers. So regarding the readers, I wanted to say is like, how's the selling going and how does it like?
Well, this is my journey now. So this is where it's trying to figure out the best way to get it out there. Weirdly, I've had more uptakes on Threads, which is funny because they'll be like, hey, indie authors. I didn't even know what an indie author was, Vic. I was like, what's an indie author? And then
indie musician too. It's also a thing, yes.
Right. So it just means that you published it yourself or you went with a really small publishing house or like, a very small label if it was your music or, and I was like, oh, I'm an indie author. So suddenly I found myself on all these threads for calling for indie authors to share their work. I was like, oh, maybe I can. And then it was got on the ARC thread. So on ARC's advanced reader copy. So if you're someone that likes to get a story before it's even out, go find some ARCs. You can go, all we ask is in exchange for a review. So what I didn't realize was I needed to get reviews for my book. So that is what my goal is at the moment, to collect reviews from people because the more reviews you have, the more you stand out on Amazon, because that's how they feed the
Of course.
algorithm. So, but what happened was I submitted my book to Readsy Discovery. And so Readsy is like an editorial platform. And the cool thing is, if you get a review from Readsy, you can post it on all platforms and say it's an editorial review. And I actually got 5-star review. And for me, that was so exciting. And they actually said it was a must read. And I loved their review. I can't quote it word for word, but I really liked it. But it was so exciting because it was someone I had no idea who they were, right? Like, they don't know me. They just reading my book. And to get that review, it was so a proud moment, but it was so gratifying as well, going, okay, I do have something here. It's not just me sensationalizing it or making it bigger than what it is. It is something great. And since that review, the amount of book marketers and publicists that have reached out to me, it's insane. I have like 4 to 5, if not more, in my inbox every day, plus all the ones
Nice.
asking for money on Instagram. So I'm
Amazing.
wading through all of this, but at the same time, this is where you can be really clever. They keep telling me all their plans and ideas. So I'm going to go research those to help boost my book myself. And so I published it myself on Amazon to get it out there, but I also chose to go with a really small publishing house. And the reason I did that was because when I released my last book and I was approaching local bookstores about stocking it, they said, we won't get it if it's on Amazon. We'll only go with local publishers because it's easier for them to get copies, more cost effective, lots of things. So that's why I chose to go with a small publisher, and they're handling my global distribution, which to me, I'm so happy about, because it takes a lot of time and effort to get it on multiple platforms. So this is where you can start to use your own discernment and go, okay, where do I want my book to go? Like, for me, I see myself doing book signings and bookstores. I would love that because I love meeting people, so I'm like, okay, I'm happy to do that. I would love to sign books and read part of my book and get it out there on that level. So this is where, it's important to understand. But if you just want to publish a book, Amazon actually make it incredibly easy. And yes, people talk about you don't get many royalties and you don't get much money. But at the same time, if you're just publishing it for the sake of publishing it, and if it ends up being a bestseller and you sell 1 million copies and you only get $1 a copy, you're still a millionaire, right? So, do the math there. There's also Kobo now as well, so you can self-publish on Kobo. There's Apple. There's so many platforms that you can put your book on, to get it out there.
Yeah. I've seen it. And I'm not a client myself. I'm not a writer yet, but it was already crossing my feed, and then I was like saving for the future. And I ended up discussing it with my previous guest, who's also consider himself an indie writer too.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where, you play with it, and I just keep learning more and more and more. So then when I meet people, I'm like, oh, don't do that. Like, don't do it that way. This is the easiest way to do it. Or, there's a platform called Ingram Sparks. That is really good if you're a self-published author. Don't get me wrong. It's really tedious to use to get your book on there. But what it does is a lot of bookstores will order from there. So they're more than happy to order from there over Amazon. So these are different things that you can explore, and talk to people as well. Like, talk to people who have been there or done it and get their input. And, like I said, Amazon does truly make it easy. You download a thing called Kindle Creator and you upload your manuscript in there, and formats it all for you, easy, so, and I'm not an affiliate with Amazon. Please don't think that. And, I know they're a big conglomerate company, but at the same time, if they make it easier for you to get your work out in the world, why not? At the moment, if it's sitting on your computer, it's just hiding from the world anyway.
Amazing. So I guess we're going towards the end, since you have to run for another podcast soon. So I wanted to ask the question, it probably would fit the end of the podcast, end of the episode, that what's your end game if we compare it to a chess? Like, how do you see yourself in this creativity and your work in like 10 years?
My end game, well, it's kind of related, but kind of not. So my vision is to co-create a spirit school, especially for children, like a place where they can go and learn to listen to their inner authority, their intuition, and not be dismissed from that, where they can embrace their gifts rather than have them buried. And it's not just for children, it'll be for adults as well. And the creative element of myself is proving that everyone has this creative thing they want to birth. And your soul is craving for that creativity because that is your inspiration. That is how, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter if it's music, if it's writing, if it's art, it doesn't matter. We have so suppressed those parts of ourselves that when you allow it to come forward, you can create beautiful things. Like even every dream starts as, everything starts as a dream. It's just if you can anchor it into this reality that allows it to actually be real. So that's where I see all the creativity going. But also my hope is that writing becomes my main income because I actually love doing it. I just started writing for Brains magazine as well. So, which is really exciting. Yeah. If everyone's like, what's Brains magazine? Subscribe. They have really cool people and really cool articles on there.
Well, I'm from Siberia, even I heard of it. So,
yeah. So I've just become an executive contributor for Brains magazine. And the first article that will come out, which I'm just finishing, is about self-commitment. And I do talk about writing my book because it is an act of commitment to myself. But I wouldn't be where I am unless I chose to be courageous. Unless I chose to take micro risks and put myself out there and, publish my book and hope someone would find it. And I'm from Australia. It's harder for us sometimes to get our foot out there. Whereas America, you have a lot more pull, and that's what you're from Siberia. People think Siberia, you're isolated, right? But at the same time, you just put it out there and you have high expectations, but you don't try and control that either. You let go of the outcome. That was the biggest thing I got taught. Have high expectations, but let go of the outcome and then watch what happens. It's like, universe, go do this for me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are right now, where you're from, because I think in this technological age, it's actually never been easier than before. So right now, it's so much easier to host a podcast, even from Siberia, with all these limitations. So with the political stance, and from your country, it's also easier right now to publish globally because globalization never go anywhere. So, and from your plans for this academy for children, a beautiful plan, beautiful vision, because all you need is just a vision. The rest can be done because all you need is just like-minded people. You create the heart force energy and we just do it. I mean, I would be a part of it for sure because we all remember the struggles in school when we had to do the homework. So imagine if you can just do creative thing that you were born to do and they just deal with it.
And this is the amazing thing, Vic, is that I have met so many people. And when I bring up my vision, they're like, I have a similar vision. And it was only when I realized, because I was overwhelmed thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to create this myself? And it's actually, no, I'm not creating it myself. It's a co-creation. It's everyone.
There's no way you can
together.
Do it yourself. It's so big. It's tremendous.
And the other cool thing is that people go, oh, but, good luck taking on the system, blah, blah. I said, but it's not. It's creating a parallel system, and people have the choice where they can choose to stay in the old. And this is life at the moment, right? You can choose to stay in the old. You can choose to stay in the fear, or you can choose to stay neutral and honor what your intuition and your inner guidance or inner authority is pulling you to do.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. So is there anything else you wanted to share with us tonight? I mean, it's the morning for you, but it's me.
That's okay. Doesn't matter. This is why we can scale time zones these days. I feel the biggest thing is that if you've had something you want to create, or there's something that's been niggling to be birthed, just start and just do it. And sometimes, like following our curiosity and following that nudge to go learn something new that can guide you down to a new path that you never expected. And sometimes we try on the coat and it doesn't feel right, but you can take it back off again. But truly give it a good go and see what happens, because you never know who you might meet doing that, what opportunities might arise. And it's amazing how many people that I've had readings for or done work with, and it'll always come up when they ask, is there someone new coming in my life or there's new opportunities? I'm like, you need to do something new to allow something new to come in. So, if you want to paint that painting, go to the $2 stop and buy the stuff that you need. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just can be you allowing yourself to create in some way that your soul is craving for you to do.
Yes, and I would actually compare this to some sort of energy. When you, for example, you intake some food to get energy through the day, you can also feed on that creative energy. If you create more than enough, then you actually instantly compare this to the artist who doesn't sleep, for example, like me tonight, right? Because I'm feeding on that energy that it's actually, I'm creating. Someone needs it, someone will hear it, someone will maybe reach out to you for mindset work and inner authority work, and will read your book. And I think it's inspiring and aspiring to me. So it's definitely, I agree with that.
Yeah. And I always say, don't let inspiration stay inspiration. Actually take action on it. Otherwise, it's just something you heard. You're not truly inspired unless you're taking action.
Yeah, on this point, quickly, I would agree with Jay Shetty. Like, you have to sometimes do something like stupidly small, ridiculously small towards your goal. At least, for example, to me, I work in as an application, and I have all my goals and plans and decisions to do. And sometimes I don't feel like it because I'm a really creative person, and this is a structure. To me, any structure is a nightmare, but I have to teach myself that because no one else is gonna care. So I'll do something stupidly small. I open that, and from there, from my own notes, I get motivated because I forget about some of it, and I'll just go back to it. So maybe that would be an inspiration for someone to start something really, really small.
Or have a dream book. I have a book whenever I get ideas and I write it in there just so that it's out of my head and somewhere, and I know I can go back to there later. And I have lots of ideas of things I want to create. And because we can't create everything at once either. If you're a very creative person, sometimes we get lots of inspiration and we're like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this. And it can become overwhelming. But if you have someone that you can write it and you know it's safe and you can come back to it, then that dream hasn't been pushed aside, or that creative influence hasn't. You just pick the thing that feels the most resonant in the moment.
Yeah, it's force energy. For example, the field that we have, the flow, we just borrow some things and we have to take action. If we don't, someone else will take it because it doesn't belong to anyone. So it's just like a vortex of ideas always flowing. And for example, if I didn't have a chance to create this podcast and that music or something like that, and like your book, someone else would do it in a different way. So our ideas don't belong to us. So Catherine, thank you so much for joining. It was amazing conversation, and we actually did more time than we planned. It was like 30 minutes that we planned, and I told you it's gonna be like this. And I hope that you join again and share how your journey goes in the future, maybe your next release or anything. Anytime you want to share, you're always welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. I appreciate that. And I feel I'll have to get you on my show just to show how you can operate without sleep.
Well, if it's official nomination, I am in. I'm able to share a couple of things because it would be interesting for me to be on the guest perspective, because I'm always been a host, but as a guest, I don't know, maybe we can talk even longer. Who knows?
Fair enough. But thank you so much for having me, Vic, and for allowing me to share my journey, but also my book, My Virtual Obsession as well. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Catherine.